She treated a customer with kindness and got fired for it. But the next day she walked back in as the boss. Megan wasn't looking for trouble. She never had been. She wasn't the kind of person who made waves or picked fights she believed in showing. Up doing her job and treating people with kindness, that was how she had been raised. Simple principles: work hard, respect others, and keep your head down when things got messy. But sometimes doing the right thing had consequences, and she was about to learn that the hard way. For almost 3 years, Lancaster Grill had been her second home. It wasn't fancy, just a local diner on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, tucked between a gas station and a laundromat, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee, where families came for Sunday breakfast, and where the waitstaff learned your order before they learned your name. It was the kind of job that was easy to take for granted. The hours were long, the pay wasn't great, and the management barely cared, but Megan stuck with it. She had bills to pay, her rent was already too high for a one-bedroom, and her younger brother Evan was in his second year of college. He didn't know she helped cover his textbooks and groceries when their mom, couldn't she never told him, just sent a little extra when she could. That was why she took the double shifts. Why she put up with customers who barely looked her in the eye and coworkers who acted like kindness was a weakness. She had seen things here that made her stomach turn, the way Beth, a senior waitress, treated some customers like they didn't exist while she laughed and flirted with others, how Jason, a newer server, avoided certain tables altogether, how the whole energy of the restaurant changed depending on who walked through the doors. It wasn't just about money. A well-dressed businessman would get smiles and conversation. A working-class customer in a paint-stained uniform got rushed service, and if someone looked like they might not tip, well, some of the staff wouldn't even try. Megan hated it, but calling it out wasn't an option. She had learned that the hard way a few months back. She'd made a comment, just a casual remark about how a table had been waiting too long while Beth lingered by the counter scrolling through her phone. Beth had looked her dead in the eye and said, "You don't get paid extra for being a saint, Megan. That was how it was. Either you went along with it or you learned to keep your mouth shut." Megan had chosen the latter until that night, and after that night, nothing would ever be the same again. The dinner rush had come and gone. It was a slow Wednesday evening, the kind Megan actually didn't mind. Fewer customers meant fewer complaints, fewer spills, and fewer fake smiles from her coworkers who only turned on the charm when it suited them. She was at the counter refilling the sugar dispensers when the bell above the door jingled. An older black man walked in. His clothes were clean but slightly worn, nothing flashy, just a simple button-up and slacks. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but there was something in his posture, in the way he took a brief second to scan the room before stepping forward. Megan recognized that hesitation. She had seen it before, especially in customers who already knew what kind of welcome they were or weren't about to get. And sure enough, the response was immediate. Beth, leaning against the counter, didn't even look up from her phone. Jason, who had been joking with another server near the drink station, glanced toward the door, made eye contact with the man for a split second, and then went right back to his conversation. No greeting. No welcome to Lancaster Grill. Just silence. Megan felt the weight of it thick and uncomfortable. This wasn't an accident. Her coworkers had made a choice for a second. She considered keeping her head down, staying out of it. It would be easier. It always was. But then she glanced at the man again, the way he stood there waiting like he was giving them a chance to prove him wrong just this once. So Megan made a choice too. She wiped her hands on a napkin, grabbed a menu, and walked straight over. "Evening, sir," she said, her voice warm but casual. "Just you tonight." The man met her eyes, and something in his expression softened. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. Megan smiled and gestured toward an open booth near the window. "Follow me. You okay with the booth?" "Perfectly fine," he said as he settled in. She handed him a menu and pulled a pen from behind her ear. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee," he said, black. "Coming right up." Megan moved quickly, grabbing a fresh pot and pouring his cup herself. She could feel Beth's eyes on her. Feel Jason watching too, but she didn't turn around as she set the coffee down in front of him. He glanced around the restaurant, then back at her. "You the only one working tonight?" He asked, voice low enough that only she could hear. Megan knew what he meant. She flicked her gaze toward the others, where Beth was now whispering something to Jason, both of them barely even trying to hide their smirks. "Feels like it." Sometimes she said that made him chuckle. He flipped open the menu and scanned the options. What's good here? Megan tilted her head, thinking, depends on what you're in the mood for. If you're looking for something solid, the pot roast is made fresh, but if you want my personal favorite, the grilled salmon's the way to go. He raised an eyebrow. So she nodded. Promise you won't regret it. He smiled. Small but genuine salmon it is. Megan jotted it down. Great choice. As she walked back to the kitchen, she heard Beth mutter just loud enough to be heard she's wasting her time. Megan clenched her jaw but kept walking by the time she placed the order and returned with a fresh coffee refill. She could feel the shift in the air. It was subtle, but it was there, the way Beth's eyes narrowed, the way Jason kept glancing toward the booth like he was waiting for Megan to slip up or say something she shouldn't even. Tom, the manager, had peeked out from his office, scanning the room, before disappearing again. Megan had the sinking feeling that she had just put a target on her back, but she wouldn't know how bad it was until the next morning. Megan had barely slept. Something about the way Beth had muttered under her breath, the way Jason had smirked, and the way Tom had peeked out of his office gave her a bad feeling, but she told herself she was overthinking. She had done nothing wrong. If anything, she had done exactly what a waitress was supposed to do, serve customers. So why did her stomach twist as she pulled into the Lancaster Grill parking lot the next morning? The air was crisp, the sun barely peeking over the buildings as she grabbed her apron from the passenger seat and slung it over her shoulder. A couple of cars were already in the lot, including Tom's. Megan stepped inside, expecting the usual Beth and Jason standing around, chatting, the kitchen crew prepping for the morning shift, the radio humming low in the background, but something was off. Beth wasn't leaning against the counter like she usually did. Jason wasn't making coffee or cracking jokes with the line cooks. Instead, both of them were watching her. Beth had a sly little smile. Jason had his arms crossed and neither of them said a word. Megan's grip tightened on her apron, then the sound of a door creaking open. Tom. He stood in the doorway of his office, looking at her like he had been waiting for her to walk through that door. Megan, he said flatly, come with me. A cold pit settled in her stomach now. Tom didn't answer, just turned and walked back into his office. Megan swallowed hard. She could feel Beth and Jason still watching her. As she made her way to the back, she took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The office was cramped, the desk covered in paperwork and old coffee stains. A file sat open in front of Tom, but he wasn't looking at it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, let out a slow breath, and said, "We're letting you go." The words hit like a slap. Megan blinked, her mind scrambling to make sense of what she had just heard. What Tom's expression didn't change. It's not working. Out. Her heart pounded. Not working out. She let out a sharp laugh, one that had no humor in it. I've been here almost 3 years. I've never missed a shift, never been late. Tom exhaled through his nose, like he was already tired of the conversation. It's a decision we've made. Megan knew what that meant. Her throat tightened. This is because of last night, isn't it? Tom didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Megan felt heat rise to her face. So I get fired for doing my job. Tom's fingers tapped against the desk. You can collect your final paycheck next week. That was it. No warning, no explanation, just out. Megan clenched her fists, but she knew there was no point in arguing. She untied her apron and set it on the chair. As she turned to leave, she hesitated at the door, forcing herself to look back at Tom. You know this isn't right, she said, voice steady. Tom didn't even flinch. Megan shook her head and walked out. Beth was still standing near the counter when she stepped back into the main dining area, a knowing smirk on her face. Jason was pretending to wipe down a table, but he wasn't even trying to hide the look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had been waiting for this moment. Megan felt her face burn, not with embarrassment, but with anger. She wanted to say something, wanted to call them out, make a scene, demand to know how they could be so damn heartless. But she didn't. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She lifted her chin, walked past them, without a word, and pushed through the doors into the cold morning air. For the first time in 3 years, she had no job, no paycheck, no backup plan. She got into her car, slammed the door shut, and gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned. White her. White her. Breath came in short, sharp bursts. How was she going to pay rent? How was she going to help Evan with his groceries? How was she... Her phone buzzed. Megan ignored it at first, staring blankly at the windshield, her thoughts spiraling. Then she glanced at the screen unknown number. She hesitated. Then with a shaking hand, she answered, "Hello?" Deep voice came through the line, steady and familiar. "Megan?" "This is Richard Lawson." Megan frowned. "I'm sorry, who the man you served last night at Lancaster Grill?" Her breath caught. She sat up a little straighter. "Oh, yes, sir. How can I help you?" There was a pause, then Richard said, "I heard what happened." Megan's stomach twisted. Of course he had news traveled fast in places like Lancaster Grill. "Yeah, well," she said, forcing out a bitter laugh. "Guess I should have just ignored you like everyone else." Richard's next words made her freeze. "That's exactly why I'm calling, because this wasn't the end of Megan's story. It was just the beginning." Megan's grip on the phone tightened. She had no idea why Richard Lawson, just another customer or so she thought, was calling her the morning after she had been fired. Her heart pounded as she sat up straighter in the driver's seat. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" There was a pause on the other end, then Richard's voice came through, steady and deliberate. "I wasn't just there for dinner last night. Megan," he said, "I was there to see how my employees treat people." Megan blinked. "Your employees, I own Lancaster Grill," Richard said simply. For a moment, the words didn't even register. She sat frozen. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and shock. "I'm sorry." What she finally managed. "You heard me," he said. Megan pressed her fingers to her temple. "So you're telling me you own this place?" "Yes, and last night you were checking in more or less," Richard said. "I make it a habit to visit my restaurants unannounced. No formal inspections, no warning. I come in as just another customer. That's how you learn the truth about how a business is being run." Megan's chest felt tight. "And what did you learn?" she asked Richard. "Sighed that I have a serious problem with my staff." Megan let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, no kidding." There was another pause. Then Richard asked, "How long have you worked there?" "Almost 3 years." She said, 3 years, and I've never missed a shift. Never been late. I keep my head down, do my job, and treat people like human beings." She exhaled, frustration creeping into her voice, but apparently that was enough to get me fired. "That's exactly why I'm calling." "Richard," said Megan, furrowed her brows. "I don't understand." Richard was quiet for a moment before he spoke again. "I let them fire you on purpose. Her stomach dropped you what I needed to see what they would do," Richard explained. "I wanted to know if this was just about bad service or if it was something deeper, and now I have my answer." Megan shook her head. "So you let them throw me out just to prove a point?" "I know it wasn't fair," Richard admitted. "But now I know exactly who I can't trust to run my business the way it should be run." Megan felt her pulse thumping in her ears. "And what does that mean for me?" There was a shift in Richard's tone. Something firm, almost authoritative. "It means I need someone I can trust." He said, "I need someone who actually understands what it means to run a restaurant fairly, someone who doesn't pick and choose, who gets treated with dignity based on their own prejudices." Megan frowned. "I still don't see what this has to do with me." Richard's next words stopped her cold. "I want you to come back," he said, "as the new manager." Megan's breath caught. Her brain scrambled to process what she had just heard. What you heard me?" Richard said. "I fired your manager this morning. Tom's done." Megan's mouth fell open. Beth and Jason were going to lose their minds. Richard continued, "I know this is sudden, but I'm not interested in anyone else taking over you. Understand what matters in a workplace. You know how people should be treated. That's exactly what Lancaster Grill needs." Megan swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you can," Richard said firmly. "And you should." She stared out the windshield. Her mind spinning. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been tossed aside like she didn't matter, and now she was being offered the very position of the man who had fired her. She took a slow breath. "What do you say?" Richard asked. Megan hesitated. She could still hear Beth's mocking voice, Jason's smug silence, Tom's dismissive tone. They had counted her out, thought they had gotten rid of her for good, but now she had a chance to be the change they never saw coming. Megan lifted her chin, gripping the phone a little tighter. I'll do it, she, said Richard, let out a satisfied breath. Good, come in tomorrow morning, you start at 8. Megan nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I'll be there. As she hung up, she sat in stunned silence for a moment, gripping the wheel as the reality of it all sank in. Less than a day ago, she had walked out of Lancaster Grill with nothing. Tomorrow, she would be walking back in as the boss, and she wasn't coming to play nice. Megan stood outside Lancaster Grill, gripping the strap of her bag. The morning air was sharp, the kind that cut right through your clothes, but she barely felt it. She had spent all night thinking about this moment yesterday. She had walked out of this building with nothing. No job, no explanation, no respect. Today, she was stepping back in with the one thing Beth, Jason, and Tom had never imagined: she would have power. She inhaled deeply, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The scent of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, just like it always had. Customers were scattered across the booths, forks clinking against plates, the low hum of conversation blending with the radio playing in the background. At first, nobody noticed her. Then Beth turned from the counter, saw her, and froze. Jason, who had been laughing with a busboy, caught sight of her too, his mouth snapping shut mid-sentence. A flicker of something, confusion, unease crossed his face. It was almost too perfect. Megan let the moment stretch just long enough for them to squirm before walking toward the counter, setting her bag down with purpose. Beth recovered first. She scoffed, crossing her arms. What the hell are you doing here? Megan tilted her head. You'll find out soon enough. Beth's smirk faltered before she could say anything else. A door opened at the back of the restaurant. Tom stepped out from the office, already looking irritated, flipping through a stack of papers. Beth, I need you to. Then he saw her. His whole body went rigid. His eyes flicked to Beth, then Jason, like he was trying to piece together what was happening. Megan, he said slowly, you don't work here anymore. Megan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, she said, I do. Tom blinked. What? Another voice cut in before she could answer. I believe I can clarify that. Every head in the room turned. Richard Lawson walked in, calm and collected as ever, his hands in the pockets of his tailored coat. He scanned the room, taking his time before landing on Tom. Beth's face paled. Jason looked like he wished he could disappear. Tom opened his mouth, then closed it. Richard stopped beside Megan and turned to face the staff. His voice was steady, measured, but carried authority. As of this morning, Lancaster Grill has undergone some management changes, he said, effective immediately. Tom, your position is terminated. Beth gasped. Jason looked like he had been punched in the gut. Tom's face turned an ugly shade of red. Wait a damn minute, no. Richard cut him off. I've already heard enough from you. Tom's mouth snapped shut. Megan felt bad almost. Richard turned toward the rest of the staff. Some of you may be wondering what's going on. Let me make it simple. Last night, I visited this restaurant as a regular customer. He let the words sink in, and what I witnessed was unacceptable. Nobody dared to speak. Richard gestured toward Megan. This woman was the only employee who treated me with respect, the only one who did her job the way it should be done. He turned back to the staff, his expression hardening. The rest of you, some of you, ignored me completely. Some of you made it clear you had no interest in serving certain customers at all. His voice sharpened. That ends today. The silence in the restaurant was thick. Then Richard turned back to Megan. Megan is your new manager. Beth's mouth fell open. Jason's jaw clenched. The busboy standing near the kitchen looked like he wanted to clap. Megan finally let herself smile. She turned toward Beth and Jason, who were still stunned, silent, and leaned against the counter. Well, she said, lightly, this is awkward. Beth's expression twisted. You? She turned to Richard, her voice sharp. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. Richard said, you don't like it, you're free to leave. Beth snapped her mouth shut, her nostrils flaring. She wasn't stupid. She knew walking out meant losing her paycheck, and Beth wasn't about to do that. Jason, on the other hand, wasn't as smart. This is bulls. Richard cut him off. You're welcome to quit as well. Jason froze, his mouth open, then closed like he was doing the math in his head. Beth glared daggers at Megan, but Megan just smiled back. Looks like we all have a lot of adjusting to do. Megan said, her voice light but firm. So let's get to work. She watched as Beth stormed toward the coffee machine. Mumbling under her breath, Jason grabbed a rag and started wiping down a table, his movements stiff with anger. Richard gave Megan a knowing look. "I have a feeling you'll do just fine here." Megan exhaled, watching as the restaurant settled into a new reality one, where she was in charge, and for the first time since she walked into this building 3 years ago, she felt something she hadn't before: respect. The next few weeks were interesting. Megan had expected resistance. She welcomed it. Beth barely spoke to her unless necessary, her usual smirks replaced with tight-lipped silence. Jason sulked through every shift, making it painfully obvious that he was only sticking around because he had no better options. A few other servers who had always played along with the old culture of favoritism gritted their teeth and adjusted. Some didn't. A couple of employees quit in the first week. They didn't bother giving notice, just stormed out when it became clear that the way things used to work, the unspoken rules about who deserved good service and who didn't, were over. Megan didn't lose sleep over it. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make things right. She spent her first days as manager watching, taking note of who was actually putting in the work, who was resistant to change, and who just needed a push in the right direction. And slowly things did start to change. The kitchen staff, who had always kept their heads down, began to speak up, more offering suggestions, pointing out when things were unfair. The younger servers, who had been following the lead of people like Beth and Jason, started watching Megan instead. One night, a busboy, Noah, a college kid who worked nights to pay for school, stopped her as she was wiping down the counter. "You really got rid of Tom for that?" he asked, voice careful. Megan looked up for being a jackass to customers, Noah said. "Like, I mean, we all knew it happened, but I didn't think anyone actually cared." Megan set the rag down and looked him in the eye. "I care." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Good," and just like that, things started to shift. It wasn't immediate, but over time, the entire energy of Lancaster Grill began to change. People noticed customers who had been ignored in the past started coming in, more often smiling when they saw Megan behind. The counter regulars who had never spoken much started to open up, chatting about their day, tipping more than they used to. Even the staff. Those who had been skeptical at first started following her lead, and then one afternoon, Richard Lawson walked in. Megan was in the middle of balancing invoices when she heard his voice. "How's my investment doing?" She turned, pushing the paperwork aside, and smirked. "I think we're in good shape." Richard glanced around. The restaurant was busy, not just with customers, but with a different kind of energy than before. The staff moved with purpose, the atmosphere lighter, the tension that had once been there now gone. Richard nodded, satisfied. "Told you. You'd be fine." Megan leaned against the counter. "You didn't exactly give me a choice," Richard chuckled. "No, I didn't." Megan exhaled, looking around. "It's weird," she admitted. "For the longest time, this job was just a job, a paycheck, and now it's something more." Richard's expression softened. "Funny how life works, huh?" Megan thought back to that morning, sitting in her car, feeling like she had lost everything, and yet here she was. She wasn't just another waitress anymore, she was the boss, and she had made damn sure that Lancaster Grill would never go back to the way. It was because doing the right thing wasn't always easy. Sometimes it cost you everything, but sometimes it gave you more than you ever imagined. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because integrity matters. And it starts with how we treat each other.